Queensland Senator Gerard Rennick has written to Australia's Health Minister Mark Butler asking what he's going to do for victims of Australia's deadliest medical scandal, HIV and hepatitis C contaminated blood. G'day, it's Charles Mackenzie and I'm the President of Infected Blood Australia. And yes, Senator Gerard Rennick has written to Mark Butler. And yesterday, Senator Rennick was good enough to get in touch with us and let us know that he's had a response from the Department of Health and Ageing, to his letter asking when the Health Minister would do something for tens of thousands of Australians that are infected and affected by things like the deadly virus hepatitis C being transmitted to people via contaminated blood transfusions and blood treatments. Well, Senator Rennick received a carbon copy of the same letter we received when we wrote to Mark Butler. The Health Minister will not reply himself. He gets one of his staff to reply. And I've explained the reason for that is because Mark Butler is doing what his predecessor did. This is the Liberal Health Minister, Greg Hunt. Of course, Mark Butler's Labor, but it doesn't matter because the responses are just the same. They get bureaucrats to write the letters, and this is because they know that they're in criminal jeopardy. Okay, so the letter here is very interesting to Senator Rennick. And I have communicated with him and explained our thoughts, and he's given his thoughts to us. This letter basically misleads the senator. Okay, it tells the senator that all these responses have been launched for the thousands of victims. I'll just read some elements to this, and I'll explain the dishonesty and why I'm telling the senator that I believe this will evolve into becoming a criminal matter. So it says here that basically there was a Senate committee that we forced in 2004. It was terrible. It was a whitewash. It was a cover-up. Government bureaucrats were involved. There were no lawyers involved. It was very politicised. The senators agreed and arranged for CSO lying under oath about mixing in foreign blood. So a lot of the senators were part of the lie. Okay, and they treated myself and other victims very badly. We think they may even face criminal prosecution for some of this because that Senate committee was a total fraud and a cover-up, okay? And so it says here that the committee's report, Hepatitis C in the Blood Supply in Australia, found that the most effective way to address viral contamination in the Australian context was to improve access to services. Well, guess what? Thousands of Australians still didn't have those access to services, and that committee's report was written 20 years ago. And there's haemophiliacs out there who are still having to pay for liver scans, okay, because they're very at risk of liver cancer. We have many haemophiliacs in our group who've got liver cirrhosis and liver cancer, okay, and they're being forced. Some in places like Queensland have to pay for their own scans. We have other people, like others, having to pay for dental. Can be very expensive. Our teeth just implode, and if you have a bleeding disorder, you'll know what I mean. You actually bleed differently if you've got something like Hep C as well, okay, which affects dentist work. Okay, so none of those things are available. The home help that parents were promised who had haemophilia children that ended up getting HIV or Hep C, and those parents had to give up their careers to look after their children. None of that was delivered. And yet, this letter, okay, the carbon copy of what was sent to us and is now being sent to a sitting senator of the Senate misleads that sitting senator. So we have asked, the people of Queensland have asked Senator Rennick to ask questions on their behalf and also on Australia's behalf. Australia pays Senator Rennick, okay? And he is speaking up for Australians. And the federal government has written back to him misleading, okay? But even more serious, it says here, after saying they've done all these services, which they haven't done, and we want to take this to court so a judge can see, and we want to have our families go before that judge so they can explain if the courts would be good enough to let them have their side about how they've lost their homes and how some of them have lost multi-million-dollar homes and ended up in public housing, okay? And the stress that's caused on their families, all right? And people who've lost their entire careers and millions in earnings, okay? And they now are on Social Security. They can't get any counselling. They can't pay for the medicinal cannabis or the CBD that they use to try and get relief. They've got no money for dental work. They've got hardly any money for food. Okay, so we've had enough. And then the big problem here, it says here that this Senate committee that the government's lying about, it led to a range of initiatives to support patients who acquired Hep C from the blood supply, including Ongoing funding of the National Blood Authority, well, that's just a bunch of bureaucrats. That doesn't provide any relief to haemophiliacs at all or to people who receive contaminated blood transfusions. That's a regulatory body. So, okay, they funded a body that they set up, and they also funding for Lifeblood's Look Back program. This is the Australian Red Cross's tracing service for people who've got contaminated blood. It's cost the Australian taxpayer millions and millions, and we've got victims in our group that were never contacted. They found out about their Hep C through failing health, liver cancer, liver cirrhosis, and they found out decades later. And yet the Australian government spent tens of millions on this tracing service. Why didn't they just do a public recall? Why didn't they just tell people in the problem years of before the 2000s, anyone that received a blood transfusion or blood product, to see their GP, don't panic, and go and get tested for this virus? But they don't want to do that. Because if they do that, the public will find out that tens of thousands of Australians were infected with this deadly virus Hep C from the blood supply or from blood treatments. Okay, and then the government will have to explain why it was that they privatised Australia's blood products company, which was formerly publicly owned, the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories. Why did they sell that in such a hurry in 1994? What were they trying to get away from? Oh, that's right, we know what they were trying to get away from, and so do our lawyers, and so do lawyers internationally. The Labor government were trying to get away from the fact that they knew that Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, this fractionator that made blood products for people with haemophilia and other medicines using blood plasma, had just infected thousands of human beings in Australia and throughout Asia and our region. And they didn't want that, so they helped their corrupt mates at Commonwealth Serum Laboratories. They didn't want them to have to be liable, so they indemnified CSL in 94 and they privatised them. And in fact, some of the people that were involved were World Economic Forum graduates. Can you believe it? Australian government officials who graduated from the World Economic Forum. They then hired a new boss of the privatised CSL, and he had been a graduate of the World Economic Forum. Plenty of questions about their involvement and their involvement in the potential cover-up. Why is it that the Australian victims of this contaminated blood scandal that was global are still being denied help when there's victims in Canada, Ireland and the UK who've been helped for decades? And have a look here, the most serious and egregious thing that they've said here, which is going to get them in trouble, we'll take this to court, in fact, is they say that the Commonwealth contributions, okay, the Commonwealth government contributes, along with state and health territories, to hepatitis C settlements. Can you see that? Hepatitis C settlement schemes. What settlement schemes are those? Does the public know about this? So does the public know that you give hepatitis C settlement schemes? Victims in our group do. Let me explain. We've got women who had, single parents with 3 kids and they got liver cirrhosis. And the Australian Red Cross Lifeblood, do you know what they did? They said to him, listen, as long as you, don't keep talking publicly about this, and as long as you don't go to court, what we can do is we can help you out with a little bit of money. And so we've got $30,000 here for your Hep C, and the fact that you've got liver cirrhosis and you're disabled now, you're going to be disabled for life and live a shortened life. Here's $30,000, but you've got to sign a release saying you can never sue again for any reason. And guess what? A whole bunch of people signed, and they took the $30,000 because they were so poor. We even had haemophiliacs in the Australian Capital Territory, and the government lawyers turned up and said, listen, we'll give you just under $6,000, even though some of you got cirrhosis and your livers are failing. But they were so poor that they accepted. And this is in 2003. The government signed them up for $6,000. And here they are, right? They signed their lives away because they weren't told the truth about what had happened, the fact that this had been done knowingly, that this was an act of negligence. It wasn't an accident. And here you have the government telling a sitting senator that they contribute to hepatitis C settlements, thinking that's going to make it look like they've responded to this crisis, to Australia's deadliest medical scandal. Well, actually, guess what? It just opens the door to lawyers asking questions. What are these hepatitis C settlements? And why do you give them? If nothing's happened, if there is no contamination crisis, if no one was infected with Hep C from the blood supply, and if it was an accident, why are you making these settlements? Why is the public, why is the Australian taxpayer paying you to be part of these settlements? Now, Senator Rennick said to me yesterday that they're making a lot of noise about what they've done, but doesn't appear to be much substance to it, okay? And there's a lot of Queensland infected blood victims who are really liking Senator Rennick for standing up for them. And as I've told Senator Rennick, they're waiting to be interviewed by him if he'd like to interview them, to show other Queenslanders or show Australia what politicians like Senator Rennick have to fight for. Okay, we wrote emails to every politician in the country, and we have done for decades. And in recent years, there was only one politician in Australia that responded, and that was Senator Gerard Rennick. We wish it could have been far more. We wish we could have got politicians from all sides of politics. Okay, Infected Blood Australia doesn't care what people's politics are. We only care about getting justice, okay, and help for everyone that's been infected and affected by Australia's deadliest medical scandal, contaminated blood. We're very insistent on that. We'll work with any politician, okay, who wants to work towards the right thing for Australia. So thank you to Senator Gerard Rennick, and on behalf of our group, and we hope that the good senator can keep on asking questions and holding this government to account. And remember, if you'd like to support the Royal Commission, a proper legal investigation into Australia's contaminated blood scandal, you can do so by clicking the link in our bio or on a link that I'll leave with this video. Thank you very much for listening.